It's just some old papers, Sylvia. You don't seriously think they matter. That's what my husband said, standing there in his office slippers and a smug little smile, like I'd just handed him a child's crayon drawing and asked if it should be framed. He took the yellowed envelope from my hands, barely glanced at the folded documents inside, and dropped them on the hall table like they were grocery receipts. Worthless, he added, already turning back to his laptop. Don't clutter the place with junk. I didn't answer. I stood there for a moment, watching him hunch over the screen, tapping out an email with the same fingers that used to hold my hand, like it meant something. His back looked smaller than I remembered. Funny how some men shrink when you stop fearing them. The envelope had surfaced while I was cleaning out Aunt Clara's cedar trunk, the one with the brass corners and the smell of lavender and dust. She'd passed 6 months ago, and I'd put off sorting her things. Not because I was grieving, but because I knew how many little ghosts were folded into her linens, tucked between her sewing patterns and clipped newspaper recipes. Clara had been the only one who ever said I had a brain. Don't let that man convince you otherwise, she'd tell me. I hadn't listened. That afternoon, I found the envelope beneath a stack of birth certificates and expired insurance forms. Inside, a thin sheaf of papers with my maiden name, signatures in blue ink, and the company logo I'd seen for 40 years on mugs and company polos. Millbridge and Sons Construction. The and Sons always bothered me. Harold had built the company in the early 80s, or so he liked to say. Built from the ground up, he told everyone, though most of the ground was inherited, and the first clients were family friends. I'd been there, too. I remembered helping him fill out the state forms, typing his proposals on a second-hand typewriter, correcting grammar he never quite mastered. He called me his secretary, then his helper, then eventually, the woman who doesn't get involved in business. Later that evening, when Harold went to his weekly poker game, some ridiculous boys' club thing with cigars and bad whiskey, I made a cup of chamomile tea and sat with those papers at the kitchen table. No distractions. Just the quiet tick of the wall clock and the sound of my own breath. The documents were share certificates, issued in 1987, transferred by Harold's late uncle, Ronald Milner, to Sylvia A. Milner, née Green. It was all there. 52% of common stock. Handwritten note attached. She'll take care of this better than Harold ever would. I laughed. A dry, involuntary laugh that startled even me. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room armchair with Clara's papers on my lap and the fireplace flickering low. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I wasn't even thinking about money. I was thinking about the way Harold had looked through me at dinner that week when I'd asked about the company's finances. Just a simple question. He said, "Sweetheart, let's not pretend you understand any of that." I'd nodded. I always did. In the morning, I called an old friend of Clara's, Mrs. Delaney, a retired probate attorney who still did consulting for women in complicated marriages. That's how she put it. She invited me to bring the papers to her office. "We'll have a look," she said, "and I'll bring the good coffee." I left the house quietly, not bothering to tell Harold where I was going. He assumed I was off to the grocer, or perhaps another one of my little widow luncheons, as he liked to call them. He didn't ask. He rarely did. Mrs. Delaney had the kind of office I liked. Wood paneling, no receptionist, a few plants that looked older than me, and a desk cluttered with folders and half-drunk tea. She wore a burgundy cardigan with a hole in the sleeve and had lipstick on her front tooth. I trusted her immediately. She read in silence. page after page. Her eyebrows rose once, then again. "You understand what this means?" she asked finally. "I think so. You own the company, not the whole thing. 52%, Sylvia. That's not a foot in the door. That's your name on the building." I didn't answer. I looked at the certificate again, tracing the embossed seal with my fingertip. It had always seemed like Harold's world. Hard hats, contracts, numbers scrawled on blueprints. I'd seen it from the outside, through the fogged glass of his pride. "He doesn't know," I said. Mrs. Delaney gave me a long look. "Don't tell him, not yet." I wasn't planning to. I drove home in silence, the envelope locked in my purse like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Harold was already on the phone when I walked in, barking orders to someone, laughing too loud. "If we get the Whitaker contract," he said into the receiver, "we'll double our valuation before Christmas." He saw me come in, waved absently, mouthed, "Lunch?" then went back to pacing. I didn't answer. I just walked upstairs and shut the door behind me. For the first time in years, I wanted to be alone. Not out of defeat, but preparation. Because that envelope in my bag wasn't junk. It was the key to everything. Mrs. Delaney called me early the next morning. "Sylvia, I've had my assistant check the corporate registry," she said, her tone brisk but laced with satisfaction. "Your shares are still active and valid. Never revoked, never reassigned. He never even tried to change them." For a long second, I couldn't answer. The sound that came out of me was half breath, half laugh. "So it's real?" "Oh, it's very real. You're the majority shareholder of Millbridge and Sons. Legally, that company belongs to you." Belongs to me. The words didn't sink in right away. For decades, that business had been Harold's world, his altar, his identity. He worshipped it more faithfully than he ever worshipped family. Or me. I'd built dinners around his meetings, holidays around his deadlines. Every new client was a celebration. Every financial setback, a silent punishment. And all that time, I'd thought the company was his temple. Turns out, I'd been the foundation. Mrs. Delaney cleared her throat gently. "Sylvia, you'll need to file a verification form with the state and inform the company's accountant. Quietly, for now." "Quietly," I repeated. The word fit me like a glove. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, a place where for 40 years I'd served breakfast and coffee, always from the left side of Harold's chair. I could still see his newspaper lying open to the business section, the smell of fried bacon clinging to the air, his voice echoing from years ago. "You just don't understand these things, Sylvia. Leave the numbers to me." I used to think that was love. A man protecting me from the world's complexities. Now I knew it was a leash, trimmed to look like a ribbon. That afternoon, I called the accounting office Harold used for the company. A young man answered, polite, a bit nervous. "Millbridge and Sons? Finance Department. How may I assist?" "My name is Mrs. Sylvia Milner," I said evenly. "Could you check if my shareholder record is still current in your system?" There was a pause, the sound of typing, then another pause. Yes, ma'am. It shows 52% of common stock under your name, issued by Ronald Milner in 1987. Is that correct?" "Yes," I said softly. "That's correct." He hesitated. "Would you like us to send updated statements to your address on file, Mrs. Milner?" "Yes, please do. And keep this conversation confidential for now." "Of course, ma'am." I hung up, my hand trembling slightly, though not from fear this time. From clarity. Harold came home that evening, humming, carrying a new set of blueprints and that self-satisfied air that used to fill the entire room. "Guess who just landed the Whitaker project?" he said. "You're looking at the man who's about to make 7 figures." I smiled. "That's wonderful, Harold." He tossed his coat on the chair, kissed my forehead like you'd pat a pet. "You see, sweetheart, you don't have to worry about a thing. I've got everything handled." "I'm sure you do." He didn't notice my tone. He rarely noticed anything that wasn't about him. While he poured himself a drink, I took the envelope from the drawer and slipped it into my purse again. I wasn't hiding it anymore. I just wanted it close. He might have mocked the papers once, but now they pulsed with weight. The kind of quiet power that doesn't need to announce itself. After dinner, he spent an hour on the phone bragging about expansion plans, complaining about suppliers, laughing at idiot investors. I listened from the couch, knitting half-heartedly. When he finally hung up, he looked at me over his glass. "You know, Sylvia," he said, "if anything ever happens to me, the company's in good hands. The boys will handle it." "The boys?" I asked. "Meaning your partners?" "No. Meaning my son, obviously. He's been learning the ropes. I'll leave him everything. He'll take care of you." Take care of me. I felt something deep inside. Not anger, not yet. Just the slow tightening of realization. He'd already written me out of his story, probably on paper too. He was already imagining a world where I was another dependent widow, waiting for a monthly allowance from the child I'd never birthed. I nodded, keeping my voice calm. "That's thoughtful of you, Harold." He grinned. "You'll thank me one day." I smiled back. "I already do." When he went to bed, I stayed up with the house lights dimmed. The city outside our window was quiet, orange lamps flickering on the wet pavement. I took out the documents again and laid them neatly on the table beside a fresh notebook. At the top of the first page, I wrote 3 words. "This changes everything." Then, in steady handwriting, I made a list. Not of revenge, but of order. Verify control status. Consult financial advisor. Contact corporate lawyer. Wait. Watch. I wasn't going to shout or slam doors or cry. That was Harold's way. All noise and ego. My way would be silence, patience, precision. The kind of power that doesn't need to prove itself. There's a particular kind of quiet you learn to live in after decades of being told your voice doesn't matter. It starts small. A comment at dinner, a joke at your expense, a hand on your wrist when you try to interrupt. "Let me handle this." You wouldn't understand. It's not your lane, sweetheart. You brush it off, because what else can you do? You love him. You chose this life. And you tell yourself that's what women do. They make homes, not decisions. That lie takes root if you let it. And for a long time, I did. I met Harold when I was 25, already a bit too old for a first marriage by the standards of my time. He was charming, confident, full of plans. He said I was too smart for my own good. A firecracker, he called me, like it was both a compliment and a warning. But I loved the way he looked at me like I was the only woman in the room. I mistook attention for respect. A lot of women do. He wanted to start a company, construction, renovations, something hands-on. He had connections, charisma, but no patience for paperwork. That was where I came in. I filled out the registration forms, filed permits, tracked every receipt in a ledger. We worked out of a small, rented office with a leaky ceiling and a view of a dumpster. We shared one phone line and one desk. Those first few years, we were partners. Not legally, the business was in his name, but in spirit, or so I thought. Then came the first real contract, A warehouse renovation upstate. Big client. Big money. Harold brought in 2 guys he knew from college to keep things professional. Suddenly, I was no longer the co-founder. I was the wife. They stopped looping me in on meetings. I stopped correcting their grammar on proposals. And Harold changed. It wasn't sudden, just quiet subtractions. First it was, let me handle this client. He's old school. Then, don't worry about the accounts. The guys are looking after that. Then came the laughing at dinner when I asked why the numbers didn't add up. You're worrying over nothing, he said. The business is fine. Go buy yourself a book or something. Eventually, I stopped asking. He took it as proof I trusted him. Really, it was exhaustion. Years passed that way. 1 turned to 5. 5 into 20. I kept the house. Raised his son from his first marriage. A boy who barely looked at me unless he needed something. Harold worked. Traveled. Expanded. He'd come home smelling like cigars and concrete dust, tell me about investors and margins, then disappear into his den with a scotch. I brought him food, cleaned up after his mess, stopped correcting his stories. I didn't even realize how silent I'd become. The worst part wasn't the isolation. It was the performance, the smiling at dinners, the nodding in public, the pretending we were still that team from the leaky office. He never hit me, never shouted, just made sure every room I entered already had a conclusion waiting for me. And I went along with it, for years, until now. Now, every memory like that sits beside me with a different weight. Not shame. I'm too old to feel ashamed of survival. But clarity. Every worthless paper joke. Every time he signed a contract and never thought to mention it. Every time he left me off the annual retreat or the holiday bonus list. I wasn't invisible. I was erased. He just forgot one thing. Ronald. Harold's uncle had always liked me. He was the only man in that family who didn't treat me like Harold's +1. When he got sick in the late 80s, I visited him twice a week. Brought soup. Helped with his bills. He'd ask about the company, and I'd tell the truth. The numbers don't make sense. The partners are skimming. Harold's never home. I never expected anything in return. I just wanted someone to see me. Apparently, he did. Because when he sold his shares, he didn't sell them to Harold. He gave them to me. I want the company in good hands, his note had said. I've seen who actually does the work. And Harold never noticed. I guess he thought the company just magically stayed afloat, that employees just stuck around, that contracts renewed themselves. Maybe he really believed that the only role I ever played was that of a quiet wife in the background, apron on, dinner warm, eyes down. I'm not angry, not in the way people expect. I'm just done. Done pretending I don't see what's been done to me. Done waiting to be respected. Done watching my life from the wings while someone else forgets I was ever center stage. It's time to walk out of the wings. Tomorrow, I have another meeting with Mrs. Delaney. We'll begin the process of formalizing the transition, notifying the registrar, filing a formal declaration of majority ownership. It'll be quiet, legal, clean. Harold will never see it coming, and I won't say a word. Not until it's official. Not until every signature is in place. Not until the next time he tells me the company is his. And I get to say, softly, calmly, finally, no, Harold, it's mine. He didn't notice when I skipped our morning routine. I didn't pour his coffee, didn't warm his muffin, didn't leave the paper folded to the business section the way I had for nearly 30 years. I just sat quietly in the sunroom, sipping my own tea, listening to the house breathe. Harold walked in already on the phone, laughing that laugh he always used with clients. Loud, performative, more teeth than joy. "Of course, Bill," he said, waving vaguely in my direction, as if I were the maid passing through. "We're ready to scale fast. Once the Whitaker job wraps, I want you and the partners at the table. Expansion, acquisitions, a possible exit strategy by Q3. I watched him as he paced, barefoot on the tile, his voice full of bluster and ambition. My husband, the visionary, the empire builder, the man who'd never once mentioned my name in a boardroom, who'd spoken more openly to delivery men than to the woman who made his life possible. "You'll love this," he said into the phone. "My son's coming in to shadow me next week. Finally decided to take the business seriously. He'll inherit it one day anyway. Might as well learn the ropes." I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I just stared into my tea until the liquid stilled. I knew this moment would come. Knew Harold would start laying out a succession plan that didn't include me. What surprised me was how calmly I took it. There was no heartbreak left to draw from. He was simply confirming what I already knew. In his mind, I'd always been temporary. A wife until further notice. A placeholder until a legacy could be passed down in a straighter line. When he ended the call, he turned to me with that smile. Condescending, practiced. "Sil, can you believe it? The boy finally grew up. Said he wants to be part of the family business." "Is that what he said?" I asked. "Well, close enough." He chuckled and poured himself coffee, not noticing the pot was cold. "He's ambitious like his old man, and when I retire, it'll be his. I'll make sure of that." He sipped, then winced. "This is cold." "Yes," I said. "It is." He left the room without asking why. Later that afternoon, I walked past his office on the way to the garden and overheard him in another call. "Don't worry about my wife," he said, voice lowered, impatient. "She's got no stake in this, legally or otherwise. She just does the books. We keep things separate, just does the books." It almost made me laugh. I hadn't touched the company's finances in 20 years. After Ronald passed, Harold moved everything to a real firm and locked his door tighter. But that narrative, me, the harmless housewife, was too useful to let go of. And now it was going to cost him everything. That evening, while Harold was out at some charity dinner, a table with his name on the placard, a speech he wrote himself, a standing ovation he'd chase like a fix, I called Mrs. Delaney again. "I'm ready," I said. She didn't ask what I meant. She simply said, "Come in tomorrow. We'll start with a motion to update the state business register. I've already spoken to a tax specialist. It'll be clean." "What about the company's internal records?" "You're majority owner. Once it's on file, you have the legal right to request full access. Books, minutes, everything. And if he resists," she chuckled, "then we remind him what the law says about fraud and concealment. But he won't. Men like Harold never believe they can lose. Not until it's already gone." I hung up and stood at the window, watching the garden. The hydrangeas had started to wilt. The sprinkler was broken again. Harold said he'd fix it weeks ago. He always said that. Promised action, delivered delay. He didn't believe I'd ever notice or care. But I did. And now I noticed everything. The next morning, I dressed deliberately. Navy blouse, cream slacks, low-heeled shoes. I pinned on the silver brooch Clara had given me at my wedding, the one I hadn't worn in years because Harold said it made me look too serious. Today, I wanted to look serious. I wanted to look like someone whose name would soon be on official documents. Mrs. Delaney's office smelled like old leather and coffee. She had a stack of forms already printed, paper-clipped, flagged with sticky notes. Initial here. Sign here. This one needs your driver's license. It took less than 20 minutes, and just like that, the company Harold had built on arrogance and omission no longer belonged to him. Not legally, not structurally, not anymore. I left the office with the carbon copies in my purse and a calmness in my bones that I hadn't felt in decades, the kind that comes not from revenge, but from recognition. Recognition of the truth. I wasn't asking for a seat at the table anymore. I owned the table. I didn't tell Harold I was going. He left early that morning in one of his performative rushes, phone pressed to his ear, shirt unbuttoned at the collar like some overworked CEO from a movie. He kissed my cheek out of habit, not tenderness, and muttered something about a board strategy session before disappearing into the driveway. By the time he reached the office, I was already on my way. Millbridge and Sons occupied a 2-story building in the newer part of town, all glass and polished stone, the kind Harold used to scoff at before he had the money to rent one himself. I hadn't stepped foot inside since the ribbon-cutting ceremony 10 years ago. Even then, I hadn't been invited to the front row. Just a folding chair near the refreshments, smiling politely, while Harold gave a speech that included everyone but me. I wore my gray wool coat, the one he always said made me look overdressed for errands, and low-heeled shoes that didn't click too loudly. I didn't want to draw attention. Not yet. The receptionist was new, young, maybe mid-20s, with acrylic nails and a lip gloss that smelled like strawberries. "Hi, ma'am. Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said. "I'm here to speak with the operations manager, or whoever oversees shareholder records." She blinked. "I'm sorry. Are you a client?" "No." "Vendor?" "No." She hesitated, fingers hovering above her keyboard. "Then I'm not sure." "I'm a majority shareholder," I said simply. That stopped her. I'll need to call someone," she stammered. "May I have your name?" "Sylvia Milner." Her eyes widened. Not because she knew who I was. She didn't. But because that last name opened doors around here. It still had weight. Still carried the illusion that Harold Milner was the only man holding the reins. She dialed, whispered into the phone, glanced at me twice, then hung up. "Someone will be down shortly." I nodded and took a seat in the sleek, gray waiting area where a screen flashed the company logo on repeat. Millbridge and Sons, building legacies. How fitting. A few minutes later, a man in a too-tight blazer walked out of the elevator, scanning the room with mild confusion. "Mrs. Milner?" "Yes." "I'm Joel Matthews, internal counsel." "Would you like to speak in my office?" I followed him down the hall, watching as heads turned. Staff who'd never seen the founder's wife except in photos, probably assuming I was here to drop off cookies or complain about a parking space. Joel's office was neat, efficient. No family photos, just books on corporate law and a bottle of expensive water sweating on his desk. "How can I help you today?" he asked, sitting carefully, like I might break. I handed him the documents. He skimmed the top page, then stopped. His eyes flicked to me, then back down. "These are—" He trailed off. "Shareholder transfer certificates," I said. "Filed and verified. Ownership confirmed as of yesterday with the state business registry." 52%, he murmured. "Issued by Ronald Milner?" "Yes, my late husband's uncle. He transferred his shares to me in 1987. The transfer was never revoked." Joel swallowed. "Has Harold seen this?" "No," I said. and I'd like to keep it that way. For now. He took a long breath. Legally, you're entitled to full access. Financial records, board minutes, voting privileges. I know. May I ask what your intentions are? I looked at him evenly. My intentions are to understand exactly what I own and how it's been run without my knowledge for 30 years. Joel nodded slowly, clearly recalibrating everything he thought he knew about the woman in front of him. I'll need to notify the board. We're due for a quarterly meeting next Monday. I'll be there, I said. I expect full access to the reports by end of week. He paused again. May I be honest with you? Of course. This will change things. People here are loyal to Harold. They see him as the face of the company. I smiled. That's fine. I've never needed a face. I have the facts. As I stood to leave, Joel walked me to the elevator. Is there anything else you need, Mrs. Milner? Yes, I said, turning to him. When you inform the board, don't use the word update. This isn't a change. It's a correction. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped in. By the time I reached the lobby, the receptionist couldn't meet my eyes. Word travels fast in buildings like this. I walked past her without a word, the click of my shoes just loud enough this time. In the parking lot, I sat in the car for a moment before turning the engine. Across the street, a construction crew was laying fresh concrete. Men in orange vests, shouting over machinery, pouring the foundation of something new. For years, I was told I didn't belong in places like that. Turns out, I own the ground they're building on. They made the mistake of underestimating me. Again. It was Thursday morning when I returned to the office, this time with purpose. I wore a charcoal suit I hadn't touched in years, the one I used to wear to funerals and court appointments. It still fit. My hair was pulled back neatly, my shoes polished. I looked like someone prepared to speak clearly and not be interrupted. I carried a leather folder with copies of every document Mrs. Delaney had filed. Notarized, stamped, undeniable. The receptionist tried to smile this time, but it faltered. Mr. Milner's in a meeting, she said quickly. Would you like me to tell him? I'm not here for Harold, I said. I have an appointment with your general counsel. Joel arrived within minutes. He looked nervous. Good. He led me past the receptionist and into the elevator, silent until the doors closed. I notified the executive team, he said, but there's some pushback. I expected as much. They want to see the originals. They're saying the copies might be outdated or they can see them, I cut in. But I'm not asking for permission. I'm here to inform. We walked through the corridor where Harold's name was etched in brushed steel beside the words, Founder and CEO. His door was closed. Good. Let him stay there in whatever illusion he was still holding. In the conference room, 3 men and 1 woman sat around a long glass table, folders open, coffee cups steaming. They all turned as I entered. This is Mrs. Sylvia Milner, Joel said, with forced calm. She's here regarding her ownership claim. One of the men, tall, mid-40s, with a watch worth more than my car, leaned back. Claim? I placed the leather folder on the table, opened it, and handed each of them a copy. My ownership? I said. Not a claim. Ownership. 52% of Millbridge & Sons common stock transferred in 1987 by Ronald Milner and fully verified by the state registrar as of 2 days ago. They skimmed the pages in silence, eyes moving faster now. This is unexpected, said the woman. Linda, according to her nameplate. Her voice was smooth, professional, but uncertain. It may be unexpected, I said, but it's not untrue. The tall man, I'd later learn his name was Tom Granger, the CFO, scoffed. Why would Ronald give his shares to you? I turned to him slowly. Because he knew who kept the company alive when Harold was still chasing golf games and dinners with potential investors. He saw who balanced the ledgers, who met the suppliers, who made sure the payroll got processed when the banks were slow to clear. Ronald wasn't blind, just quiet. You're not listed in the internal registry, Tom said, flipping through a binder. No, I'm not, because Harold never reported the transfer, which I might add, violates several disclosure statutes. But we'll get to that. Joel cleared his throat. The documents are valid. I've confirmed with the Secretary of State. Linda glanced up. And what do you intend to do with this position, Mrs. Milner? I intend to do what every owner should do, I said. Understand what she owns. Participate. Make decisions. Tom leaned forward. This isn't a hobby, Mrs. Milner. This is a multi-million-dollar business. And yet, I replied, for over 30 years, it's run without audited financials, without a compliance officer, and with Harold signing every contract himself. That ends now. He stared at me, lips parting slightly. The look of a man realizing the train was moving without his permission. I'd like access to the past 5 years of financial reports, I continued, turning to Linda. Bank statements, contracts, board meeting minutes, and I want to be notified of any pending transactions immediately. That's a lot to process, she said. You have until Monday. There was a pause. Joel looked at them. She has the authority, legally. I gathered the extra copies back into the folder and stood. Thank you for your time. You may continue running your meetings as usual. But know this, the days of Harold's handshake deals are over. From now on, we follow protocol. I walked out without waiting for a response. The silence behind me was answer enough. In the hallway, Harold stepped out of his office just as I passed. He froze. Sylvia? What the hell are you? Not now, I said. You'll be informed. He reached for my arm. I didn't flinch, just looked at his hand until he pulled it back. This isn't your place, he said quietly, almost hissing. You don't know how things work here. I know exactly how they work, I replied. And now, so will everyone else. I left the building without raising my voice, without calling security, without so much as a slammed door. But I could feel the tremor behind me, like the first crack in a dam, and I was no longer trying to hold the water back. It didn't take long for the legal confirmation to hit Harold where it hurt. By Friday morning, Joel had done exactly what I expected him to do. He double-checked, triple-checked, then called in an external corporate law firm to review the entire case. Men like Harold never believe women like me, but they'll believe a polished man in a suit with a Harvard diploma and a $600 haircut. By noon, my phone rang. It was Joel, his voice tight but composed. Mrs. Milner, he said, the external counsel has finished their review. There's no dispute. You're the rightful majority shareholder, full voting rights. You have legal standing to take any action consistent with the company's charter. I know, I said. Send the report to Harold. There was a long pause. He's not taking it well. I'm sure he's not. And I hung up. By late afternoon, Harold was home. I heard the door slam with the kind of force he only used when something in his world had cracked. His footsteps were fast and hard across the tile. I stayed where I was, sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of tea in front of me, the folder open beside it. I didn't move, didn't even look up when he entered. You went to the board? He asked. Yes. You sent legal documents to my staff? My staff now, technically. He stared at me, breath heavy. You've lost your mind. No, I said calmly, finally meeting his eyes. I found it. He grabbed a chair, dragged it out with a screech, and dropped into it across from me. His hands were trembling slightly, and for the first time in years, I saw panic behind his composure. Do you even understand what you've done? He said. Yes. You've humiliated me. You've embarrassed me in front of my team. You've thrown a wrench into 30 years of lies? I interrupted. He blinked. 30 years of pretending I didn't exist. 30 years of telling everyone I was just the wife, just the woman who made dinner, just the name on the birthday cards no one read. You forgot that Ronald trusted me. You forgot that I used to sign your checks. Harold's jaw tightened. You don't know how to run a company. Then teach me, I said flatly. Like you said you would when we started. He looked like I'd slapped him. That was decades ago. Yes, I said. It was. Silence fell between us. Outside, a car drove by slowly, the crunch of tires on gravel punctuating the stillness. I watched Harold press his lips together, composing whatever version of himself he thought might convince me to back down. You don't want to run a business, Sylvia, he said at last. This is just some sort of revenge. No, I said. It's correction. He ran a hand through his hair. Do you have any idea how bad this looks? I raised my eyebrows. To who? To everyone. Then maybe everyone needs a new picture of you. He sat back in his chair, staring at the ceiling like it might offer him divine intervention. Then he stood abruptly and paced to the sink, muttering something I couldn't hear. I've spent my life building that company, he said. No, I said. We spent the first 5 years building it. You spent the next 25 erasing me from it. He turned around, eyes flaring. I didn't erase you. You didn't invite me to board meetings. You told people I didn't get business. You said your son would inherit everything. Did it ever occur to you that I might still be there? That I might still matter? His silence was answer enough. I never wanted control, I said. Not until you made it clear that control was the only language you respected. He sank into the chair again, quieter this time. What are you going to do? He asked finally. Review everything, I said. Audit the books. Meet with every department. Decide what stays and what changes. And me? I stared at him for a long moment. The man I had loved. Once. The man I had defended to Clara, to Ronald, even to myself. The man who had looked me in the eye and said, "Let me handle the hard stuff." I haven't decided, I said. He looked away, his fingers curling around the edge of the table. He didn't argue. That's how I knew he understood the truth. For the first time in our marriage, he wasn't the one setting the terms. That night, I went to bed before him. Left the kitchen light on. Left the folder on the table. I didn't need to shout. The truth was already louder than anything he could say. And now everyone would hear it. The air in the boardroom was thick with politeness and fear. I walked in 10 minutes before the meeting started. Not late, never late. Early enough to take the seat at the head of the table before anyone else could forget who belonged there now. Joel met me at the elevator and guided me through the upper floor with the careful quiet of a man escorting a fuse toward a powder keg. But I didn't explode. I didn't even raise my voice. I didn't have to. The room quieted as I entered, all chatter evaporating like mist under heat. I carried no briefcase, just a small leather folder and a notepad. I didn't smile, but I nodded. Once, To each person seated as I passed them on my way to the chair Harold used to call mine, only when the media was watching. I took it without asking. 12 seats. 10 of them filled with men and women who had never once looked me in the eye at company events. The 11th was still empty. Harold's. I'd expected as much. He couldn't face this, not yet. "Good morning," I said. A few murmured the phrase back. Some only nodded. One man, Tom Granger, the CFO, kept his arms crossed. "I believe we're scheduled for the Q3 operations review," I continued. "Let's proceed." Linda, ever calm, ever cautious, began with a summary of project timelines and budget allocations. She spoke efficiently, her voice measured, her eyes darting to me now and then as if waiting for a reaction. I gave her none. I took notes, listened, watched. They didn't know yet who I was. Not really. But they were about to find out. When the review ended, there was the usual pause, the subtle glance toward the empty seat that used to hold Harold's decisions. But no one spoke. So I did. "Before we adjourn," I said, "I'd like to address one item of immediate concern." 10 heads turned. Papers were straightened. Backs stiffened. I opened the folder in front of me, took out a single sheet, and slid it forward. "This is a motion for termination of employment," I said. "For cause?" Tom Granger blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "For cause," I repeated. "Specifically, deliberate misrepresentation of company liabilities, unauthorized disbursement of bonuses, and falsified expense reports. All under your oversight." He laughed. "You can't be serious." "I'm entirely serious," I said. "And I have documentation." Joel slid a thick packet across the table toward Tom. "It's all here," he said quietly. Tom's face flushed. "This is absurd. These are standard practices. Harold approved every—" "Harold no longer approves anything," I said. He stood. "You have no idea how this business runs. You can't just walk in here and—" "I can," I interrupted, "and I have." Silence. No one came to his defense. Not even Linda. He looked around the room, desperate for an ally. He found none. "You'll hear from my lawyer," he muttered, collecting his papers. "I expect nothing less," I said. "You may also collect your personal items by end of day. HR has been notified." He left without another word. The door shut behind him with a soft click. I turned back to the table. "For those of you wondering," I said, "this isn't personal. It's structural. I have no interest in vendettas, only accountability." No one responded, but I saw it in their faces, not just shock. Respect. The kind that comes when power no longer needs to explain itself. I stood. "We'll reconvene next week. In the meantime, I expect full transparency from every department. If there's something I need to know, tell me now. Not after I find it in an audit." I walked out without looking back. In the hallway, Joel caught up with me. "That was decisive," he said carefully. "It was necessary." He hesitated. "You should know." Harold tried to block the audit. Called the accounting office directly. Told them you were having some sort of emotional breakdown. I stopped walking. "And what did they say?" "They told him it was already approved by majority vote." I smiled for the first time that day. Good. When I stepped outside, the air was cool and crisp, the first real breath of autumn in the city. The wind caught the edge of my coat and lifted it slightly, like a page turning itself. The doorman offered to call a car. I declined. I wanted to walk. Wanted to feel the concrete under my shoes, the subtle tremor of the building behind me, the invisible line that had been crossed. For years, I was dismissed. Today, I dismissed someone else, not to be cruel, but to be clear. The newspaper arrived like it always did, folded in thirds, tucked beneath the doormat, still smelling faintly of ink and rain. Harold didn't notice it at first. He was in the kitchen, clattering around with the coffee machine like it owed him something. His mood had been brittle all week. He didn't yell, not quite, but everything about him vibrated with silent protest. Drawers slammed harder, silverware clinked louder. His sighs dragged on like someone narrating a tragedy no one had asked to hear. I picked up the paper without a word. The front page was politics, as usual. But there, in the lower left corner, just above the fold, was the story that mattered. Ownership transfer finalized at Millbridge and Sons. By staff writer, Regional Business Desk. A small, plain headline. A short paragraph. No quotes, no photos, just the facts. Sylvia Milner, majority shareholder, confirmed in official filing. Control of Millbridge and Sons Construction transferred quietly last week. Harold Milner, founder, retains minority stake, but no longer holds executive authority. No public statement from the Milner family. No denial. No spin. Harold turned when I sat at the table. "You see the paper?" "I did," I said, folding it to the business section. He poured coffee into a mug, one of those branded company cups with the logo he used to show off like a badge. For a second, I thought he'd throw it. But instead, he held it too tightly, his knuckles whitening. "This is humiliating." I stirred my tea. "It's accurate. I built that company, and I own it." He flinched. "You could have told me," he said. "I did. You didn't listen." He slammed the mug down, not hard enough to shatter, just enough to rattle the spoon on the saucer. "Do you think this makes you strong?" "No," I said softly. "It makes me honest." He looked at me like he didn't recognize my face. Maybe he didn't. The woman he'd married would have apologized, would have tried to soften the blow, would have said something like, "I'm not doing this to hurt you." But I didn't say that. Because it wasn't true. I wasn't doing this to hurt him. I was doing it because I finally understood I didn't have to be erased to keep the peace. The article was already being shared online. Linda texted me a screenshot from the firm's social media feed. Dozens of comments. Some surprised, some confused, a few congratulatory. One in particular stood out. "Never even knew the founder's wife had a role in the business. Impressive." That word, "never even knew," said more than they intended. Harold paced to the sink, then back to the table. "What are you going to do with it?" he asked. "The company?" "Yes." "Make it accountable," I said. "Efficient. Ethical." He snorted. "Sounds like a mission statement." "No," I said. "It's a correction." He sat again, slower this time. I saw something shift in his shoulders. Not surrender, not yet, but the first quiet awareness that things were not going back to the way they were. He didn't speak for a long time. I let the silence sit between us like a new wall neither of us was rushing to knock down. Then finally, he said it. "So now what?" I met his eyes. "Now I decide." That was all. No theatrics, no revenge speech. Just the truth. The kind of truth that settles into a room and makes the walls feel straighter. The phone rang. He didn't reach for it. I did. It was Joel. "Press is calling," he said. "Do you want to make a statement?" "No," I said. "Let the paper speak." "And Harold?" "He's read it," I said. "He understands." Joel hesitated. "And are you okay, Mrs. Milner?" I looked across the table at my husband, the man who used to call me his everything, and then spend a lifetime treating me like nothing. Yes, I said. I'm more than okay. That night, when I went up to bed, I left the paper open on the kitchen table. Harold stayed downstairs. I don't know how long he sat there, staring at it. I didn't ask. Some truths don't need to be discussed. They just need to be printed. The suitcase was smaller than I expected. Just one. Navy blue, scuffed at the corners, the same one Harold used for business trips all those years. I watched from the kitchen window as he wheeled it across the lawn, not looking back. He didn't ask for help, didn't demand anything, just moved like a man who finally understood that silence could also be a sentence. The guest house sat at the far end of the property. 2 rooms, a kitchenette. He used to call it the retreat. I used to think that meant for both of us. Later, I learned it meant where he took phone calls I wasn't supposed to overhear. He didn't slam the door when he went in. He closed it carefully. That evening, the main house felt quieter than it had in decades. Not empty, calm. No shoes in the hallway, no aftershave thick in the air, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic creak of the porch swing where I sat with my tea. At 9 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. I didn't need to look. I knew who it was. Brian, Harold's son from his first marriage, stood on the front step in a pressed shirt, his posture tense with expectation. "Evening, Sylvia," he said, with a tight smile. "Brian," I replied. "You're late. I wasn't aware we had an appointment." I stepped aside and gestured toward the sitting room. He walked in like he owned the walls, like the paintings were hung for him, and the air was his to rearrange. He sat without being offered. "I think we need to talk," he said. "I'm listening." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. A man trying to look casual, but too used to control to pull it off. "My father's upset." "I'm sure he is. He's not well." I didn't answer. Let the words hang in the air like fog. He feels blindsided. This whole power grab. "It's not a power grab," I said evenly. "It's a transfer. Legal. Documented. 38 years overdue. You could have told me. You were never part of the conversation. I'm his son. You're not his successor." He blinked. I saw it then. Not surprise, but insult. Like a door he expected to be open had suddenly vanished. "You don't understand how this business works," he said. "I understand ownership. It's not just about paperwork. It's about relationships, legacy." "Legacy built on erasure," I said. "You want the company? Start with an entry-level role. Learn the operations. Earn your seat." His jaw tightened. "You want me to start from the bottom?" "I want you to understand what bottom feels like." He stood, pushed the chair back harder than necessary. "You think this is going to last? You think they respect you?" "I don't think," I said quietly. "I know." He opened his mouth to say something else, but thought better of it. Instead, he straightened his cuffs and walked out without a goodbye. The door shut. I heard the car start. Gravel cracked under tires that had once pulled into this driveway, like royalty. I stayed in the sitting room long after he left, not gloating, just breathing. The next morning, I received a letter, hand-delivered by one of the junior accountants. A resignation, not from an employee, from a vendor. A man who'd done business with Harold for 15 years. The letter was polite, but clear. "With the change in leadership, we no longer feel aligned with the company's direction." I read it 3 times, folded it neatly, slipped it into a drawer marked legal. Then I picked up the phone. "Linda," I said, "I need a list of every vendor with overlapping family interests. If there's a conflict of interest, I want it documented." "Understood," she said. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said, "just clearing the fog." That afternoon, I walked the garden path to the guest house. I knocked. Harold answered in his robe, eyes tired, jaw unshaven. "You're up early," I said. "Didn't sleep." I handed him an envelope. "Here are the updated statements. You'll see your current ownership stake, voting rights, and the boundaries of your role going forward." He didn't open it, just held it. "I didn't want this," he said. "No," I said. "You wanted to be unchallenged." He stepped aside. "Come in?" "No." His face changed, not anger, understanding. I left him standing there. The door closed behind me with a softness I'd never expected to find in departure. I didn't turn back. There was nothing left to say. The meeting wasn't mandatory. I made that clear in the invitation memo. Simple, one paragraph, no flourish. An informal gathering to address the future direction of Millbridge and Sons. Attendance optional, coffee and clarity provided. I expected maybe a dozen, 20 at most. By the time I walked into the main conference room that Friday morning, there were over 40 people waiting. Administrative staff, engineers, site managers, interns. Some I recognized vaguely from photographs on Harold's desk. Most I had never seen in person. The room went quiet when I entered. I didn't speak right away. I poured myself a cup of coffee from the dispenser, added exactly 1 sugar, stirred. I took a seat near the center of the room, not behind the podium, not at the head of the table, just among them. "I'll be brief," I said. "I know how much you all hate long speeches." A few chuckles, tense, cautious. "My name is Sylvia Milner. Some of you know me only as the founder's wife. That title is technically accurate and completely insufficient." I let that sit. What most of you don't know is that for nearly 4 decades, I've held a controlling share in this company. 52% of common stock. It was gifted to me by Ronald Milner, who believed in quiet people who do the work. Eyes widened. A few looked down at their notepads, uncomfortable. Not with the news, but with how long they'd overlooked what was right in front of them. I didn't come today to make threats or grand declarations. I'm not here to change everything overnight. But I am here to say this. The way things were is over. A pause. Going forward, this company will be run with transparency. That means no hidden bonuses, no silent partnerships, no favors traded in parking lots. If you work hard and treat people fairly, you'll thrive. If you don't, you won't. I sipped my coffee. I've already begun an audit of vendor contracts, hiring practices, and expense accounts. Not because I enjoy paperwork, but because accountability is not optional. If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about. Still silence. Stillness. Some of you may be wondering what qualifies me to lead. That's fair. I don't wear hard hats. I've never stood on scaffolding. But I know how this place was built. I typed the first invoices. I met with the first suppliers. I stayed up nights balancing the books while Harold played poker with people who never remembered my name. I didn't blink. I was erased from the story, but I never stopped writing it. Now they were listening. Fully. "You don't need to like me," I said. "But you do need to understand this. I will not be another silent partner. If you want to build something here, something real, something that lasts, I'll fight for you. But if you're here to coast, to scheme, or to use this place like a stepping stone to somewhere shinier, start packing." A woman in the back, maybe HR, maybe logistics, raised her hand hesitantly. "Are we allowed to bring you ideas?" I smiled. You're not just allowed, you're expected. Another hand, younger man, nervous. What about Harold? Harold retains a minority share, I said. He is not part of operations. He will not be speaking on behalf of the company. If you receive direction from him, disregard it unless it comes through proper channels. Someone whistled, low under their breath. Any other questions? None came. I stood, gathered my notes, though I hadn't needed them. I'll be in the office every Wednesday and Friday. My door will be open, metaphorically and literally. You're welcome to drop by with concerns, suggestions, or questions. Not gossip. I walked to the door, paused. And one more thing, I added without turning back. Don't call me Mrs. Milner. Silence. Call me Sylvia. Then I left. That afternoon, 3 people scheduled meetings with me. 2 were to report unethical practices in their departments. The third, a soft-spoken young man from project design, just wanted to ask how I took my tea, because he planned to have it ready next time I visited. The winds had shifted. Not because I demanded it, but because for the first time, someone had said aloud what everyone else had learned to whisper. This was no longer Harold's company. It was mine. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, with my name written in blue ink. Careful, elegant cursive that looked like it belonged to a different era. No return address. No stamps. Someone had left it at the office. The receptionist said it was hand-delivered mid-morning by an older woman, quiet, polite, who said simply, "For Sylvia." I opened it in my office after the staff had left for the day. The windows glowed orange with the early October sunset, and the building had that soft hush I'd grown to appreciate. Not empty, just at rest. Inside the envelope was a single page, handwritten. Dear Sylvia, you don't know me, but I knew you, in the way women know each other when they've lived through similar silences. My name is Miriam Lane. I worked with your husband years ago in the company's second office, the one on Linton Street, before the big move. I was in procurement, though officially I was just assisting. I was young, eager, and stupid enough to think being helpful would eventually be enough. It wasn't. Harold once told me I had sharp instincts, but too much mouth. He said it like it was a compliment. Then he made sure I was always 2 steps behind the next promotion. When I finally left, no one noticed. Least of all him. But I always remembered you. You used to bring lunch for the office some Fridays. Homemade pies, lemon bars, sandwiches wrapped in parchment. Everyone loved it. He told them you liked to keep busy. I knew the truth. You were feeding people because no one else was taking care of the workers who made that place run. And now I see what you've done. I saw the paper. I saw your name. I wanted to say, thank you. Not just for what you did, but for reminding me I wasn't wrong. I wasn't weak. I was simply unheard. I hope this letter finds you on a day when you're not just working to rebuild what was taken from you, but also starting to feel what you've given to the rest of us. In quiet solidarity, Miriam. I sat still for a long time after reading it. Not crying, just absorbing. There's something uniquely sharp about being remembered by someone you'd forgotten. Not because you meant to, but because life pulled you so far from who you used to be, you forgot how many others were watching while you tried to survive. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the desk drawer. Not hidden, just protected. Later that evening, I called Mrs. Delaney. Miriam Lane, I said. Can you check the records? I want to know if she was ever offered severance when she left. Give me an hour, she said. She called back in 20 minutes. No severance, no exit paperwork, just a quiet disappearance in 2001. Thank you. Sylvia? Yes? That letter, it means something. It does. The next morning, I drafted a new policy memo. I called it Legacy Review Initiative, a full audit of all former employees who had left under questionable circumstances. Severance, unpaid bonuses, disappeared pensions. It wouldn't undo the years, but it would make a record, a public one. Harold used to say, "Don't dig too deep into the past. It only slows you down." But I believe the opposite. The past isn't a weight. It's a ledger, and it's time we started balancing it. I wrote to Miriam that week, not just a thank you, but an invitation to speak, to be heard, to tell me what she saw, what she remembers, what she still carries. Her silence may have been forced, but mine never will be again. Miriam arrived 15 minutes early, carrying nothing but a worn leather handbag and the weight of 100 unspoken things. She wore a slate gray coat, sensible shoes, and a brooch in the shape of a bird, the kind older women wear when they've stopped trying to explain who they used to be. I met her at the front door myself. No assistant, no protocol. Just two women in the quiet foyer of a company that once forgot both of us. "You're taller than I remember," she said, smiling faintly. "You remembered me at all," I replied. "That's more than most." We walked to the upstairs meeting room. Not the large one with glass walls, but the smaller, warmer space I'd started using for conversations that mattered. I poured tea from the pot I'd made myself that morning. Chamomile. No sugar. Miriam sat slowly, eyes scanning the room, the details, the light. "It looks different," she said. "Cleaner. Quieter." "It is." She nodded. "It feels like it listens now." We sipped in silence for a moment. Not awkward, just deliberate. "I wasn't sure you'd write back," she said. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Her smile was sad, but strong. I needed to. I let her take her time. "Back then," she began, "I didn't have language for what was happening, just this dull sense that I was being shuffled around. Looked at, but never seen. I thought maybe I was the problem. Too direct, too proud, too unwilling to nod at the right moments." I nodded once. Quietly. "I remember one day," she continued. "Harold asked me to take minutes for a meeting I wasn't invited to. When I asked why I wasn't in the meeting to begin with, he said, 'Don't get greedy, Miriam.' Like ambition was a sin." My hand tightened around the teacup. "I quit a week later. No one asked why. No one called." "I'm sorry," I said. "You didn't do it." "No," I said. "But I let it happen. Not to you, maybe, but to myself." She looked at me carefully, then said, "And now?" "Now I don't let anyone explain me to myself." That seemed to settle something between us. She took a longer sip of tea, then leaned back in the chair. "I've thought about that building more than I ever wanted to. For years, I'd crossed the street to avoid it. It felt like a scar." "It was," I said. "But scars don't mean the wound was your fault." She smiled at that. "You've changed." "I've remembered," I said. "That's different." We spoke for nearly 2 hours. She told me about her work after she left. Temp jobs, then a small accounting firm where she stayed until retirement. She never married. "Not because I couldn't," she said. "Because I wouldn't settle for being a shadow again." When she stood to leave, I handed her an envelope. "What's this?" "Back wages," I said. "Adjusted for inflation, plus what we estimate was owed in severance." She blinked, lips parting slightly. I don't need this, she whispered. I know, I said. That's why you deserve it. She held it like something fragile, then nodded, once. No tears. Just quiet recognition. At the door, she turned to me and said, You didn't just take your name back, Sylvia. You gave it weight. After she left, I sat in that little room with her empty teacup across from mine. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel heroic. I felt repaired. Not fully, but enough. That evening, I wrote a new policy into the company handbook. Silent exits review. Every year, we would open the books, check every departure, ask questions no one used to bother asking. Because for every Miriam, there are 10 more who never get to speak. And some silences deserve to be broken, by name, by letter, or by the quiet return of dignity. He was already sitting on the bench when I arrived. It was the old park off Glenway, the one with the duck pond and the crooked birch trees that leaned just slightly toward the water. We used to walk here in the early years, before the money, before the walls, when everything still felt like possibility. Now the leaves were starting to turn, crisp golds and rusted reds scattered across the path, soft underfoot. I walked slowly, deliberately. No rush. I had waited decades for this moment, not out of longing, but out of timing. Some conversations only become possible when everything else has been stripped away. He didn't hear me approach at first. His coat collar was turned up against the wind, and his hands were buried deep in his pockets, the same posture he used to have after client meetings that went poorly. Small, tense, but pretending not to be. I sat beside him without asking. He didn't speak, so I did. I wanted to see you once more. Still nothing. I'm not here for an apology. He looked over then, not angry, just tired. I figured, he said. We sat in silence for a minute. 2. The wind carried the smell of wet bark and distant wood smoke. A child somewhere in the distance laughed, that sharp, unguarded sound that only belongs to the very young. You always loved this park, he said at last. No, I said. You did. I just came along. He nodded slowly. I suppose that's true. I turned to him. That's what most of our marriage was, Harold. Me just coming along. He didn't deny it, and that, in its own way, mattered. I don't hate you, I said. His jaw moved slightly. I don't love you either, not anymore. But I did. I really did. He looked at his hands. I believed you'd always be there. I was, until I wasn't. He nodded again, eyes on the pond. A pair of ducks paddled near the edge, unbothered, graceful. I read the article again last night, he said. The one about you taking over. They called you the unexpected force behind Millbridge. They always need a headline. You weren't unexpected, he said, almost to himself. I just never saw what was always there. That's the cruelest part, I said. Not that you diminished me, but that you forgot I was real. He breathed in deeply, then exhaled. I was afraid of losing control. You never had it, I said. You just held the microphone. We sat again in silence. Longer this time. It didn't ache. It just settled. I made a mess of things, he said. Yes. I don't know how to fix it. You don't. He turned to me then, eyes searching. I came to tell you, I said, that I release you. He blinked. What does that mean? It means I won't carry it anymore. The silence, the smallness, the years I spent shrinking to fit inside your world. It means you don't owe me guilt. And I don't owe you forgiveness. He nodded slowly. His lip trembled once, but he caught it. I never thought you'd become this. I didn't become, I said. I remembered. The ducks had gone quiet. The wind slowed. A cloud moved over the sun, softening the light. "I won't come back to the house," he said. "I know. I'll find a place." "You should." He hesitated. "Can I call you? Sometimes?" "No," I said gently. "Let this be the end." He looked down. "I mean it kindly," I added. "You're not my past anymore, Harold. You're just someone I used to wait for." He didn't argue, and that, too, was new. We sat another minute. Then I stood. He didn't. I looked down at him, the man I married, the man I stayed for, the man I finally left without ever walking out the door. "I wish you peace," I said. He nodded. "You've already given it to me." I walked back through the trees slowly. Leaves crunched underfoot. The wind picked up again, gentle but sure, like something returning to its rightful path. When I reached the street, I didn't look back. I had nothing left to carry. The building opens at 7:30, but I'm usually there by 7 hours. Not out of urgency. Not to prove anything. Just habit. The kind of rhythm a body keeps when it's finally allowed to move at its own pace. I take the same steps every morning. Coat on the rack, tea in the cup, a slow walk through the main hallway before anyone else arrives. I touch the walls sometimes, not sentimentally, just to remind myself they're mine now. Not leased, not borrowed, not inherited by accident or handed down like fine china. Earned. Earned quietly. Thoroughly. There's a photo on my desk now. Not of Harold, not of the ribbon-cutting ceremony or some award on a stage. It's a simple image, black and white. My hands on a typewriter, the original ledger book open beside me. 1986. I hadn't even turned 40. The corners of the pages are frayed. My knuckles look stronger than I remember. Some days, younger women stop by to ask for time on my calendar. They come nervous, folders clutched to their chest, eyes scanning for judgment. I try to meet them where they are, not with softness, that's never been my strength, but with clarity. I tell them what no one told me. That power is quiet when it's real. That dignity is a practice. That silence, when chosen, is strength. But when imposed, is theft. I don't give speeches anymore. I don't need to. The company speaks now in policies, in who gets hired, in who gets heard. The people who used to whisper in corners now speak plainly in the open. One woman from HR told me last week, "I don't watch my tone in meetings anymore. I just talk." That's the legacy. Not a plaque. Not a press quote. Just a room where a woman can speak without shrinking. I walk the floor at least once a day. I make no announcements. I just pass through. They see me. They nod. Some smile. Others just return to work. That's how I like it. On Thursdays, Miriam comes in to help with the employee review archive. We eat lunch in the small break room that used to be a forgotten hallway closet. We talk less now, not because we've run out of words, but because our silence feels different, like peace, not absence. She still wears that bird brooch. I asked her once why. She said, "Because I used to think I was the cage." We laughed, not loudly, just enough. Sometimes I receive letters now. From other women. Not always about business. Sometimes just about being seen. About surviving. About what it means to have spent a life making space for others and forgetting to leave any for yourself. I write back when I can, not with advice, just recognition. One letter ended with, "I didn't know I was allowed to want more until I saw that you did." That one I kept. As for Harold, he moved out quietly 2 months ago. A small apartment near the lake. Joel told me he plays chess in the park on weekends. No one there knows who he used to be. I think that's mercy, in its own way. We don't speak. There's nothing cruel in the distance, just clarity. I left the final word between us where it belongs, in the middle, undisturbed. Sometimes when I close up at night, I catch my reflection in the glass doors. I don't look younger, but I look whole. It took a lifetime to arrive here. It took silence. It took watching others take credit for what I built. It took sitting at dinner tables where no one asked how I spent my day. It took folding myself in half again and again until the only thing left was the part that served someone else's narrative. And then, one day, it took a choice. To unfold, to stand, to say no more. Not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly. If you're reading this, if you've been holding your breath inside your own life, waiting for permission to exhale, let this be it. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to fight every battle. But you are allowed to want more. You are allowed to be more. And when you're ready, unfold.